"I don't believe in love," the billionaire CEO said coldly, staring at the man who'd just been assigned to protect her. "Everyone wants something from me, my money, my connections, my power. You're no different." Mason Reece, the widowed ex-Navy SEAL with haunted eyes and a 7-year-old daughter waiting at home, met her gaze without flinching. "Good, because I'm not here to love you, Miss Werner. I'm here to keep you alive. That's all." 3 weeks later, he took a bullet meant for her, and everything changed. This is the story of a woman who built walls so high no one could reach her, and the broken man who crashed through them. A story of betrayal, fear, and the terrifying choice between staying safe and daring to live. Because sometimes, the greatest risk isn't loving someone and losing them. It's never loving at all. Adriana Werner stood in her corner office on the 47th floor of Werner Technologies Tower, surveying the city below like a queen surveying her kingdom. The Manhattan skyline glittered in the afternoon sun, each building a testament to ambition and power. At 32, she'd built Werner Technologies into a tech empire worth $3 billion, revolutionizing cloud computing and artificial intelligence. She was featured on magazine covers, invited to speak at global conferences, and feared by competitors who whispered her name with equal parts respect and resentment. She was beautiful, with sharp cheekbones, piercing green eyes, and auburn hair always pulled back in a severe bun. She was brilliant, graduating top of her class from MIT at 20, earning her MBA from Harvard at 23, and launching her first successful startup at 25. And she was completely alone by choice. "Love is a transaction," she'd tell anyone who dared to ask about her personal life, "and I refuse to be bought." Her phone buzzed with another message from her mother in Connecticut, another setup with another eligible bachelor from another wealthy family. Adriana deleted it without reading. She'd been through this dance too many times. The men who pursued her wanted one of 3 things: her money, her connections, or the trophy of conquering the Ice Queen of Silicon Valley. She dated a senator's son who'd proposed after 3 months, then accidentally left his laptop open with emails to his brother detailing how much he'd inherit once they married. She'd been pursued by a fellow CEO who'd wooed her with poetry and roses, only to pitch a merger between their companies on what was supposed to be their romantic weekend getaway. Her assistant, Jennifer, knocked timidly on the glass door. The young woman had learned to read Adriana's moods over the past year, approaching like someone might approach a sleeping tiger. "Miss Werner, your new bodyguard is here." Adriana rolled her eyes, not bothering to hide her irritation. "Send him in." This was the 5th bodyguard in 3 months. The first had lasted 2 weeks before Adriana's sharp tongue drove him to quit. The second had made the mistake of suggesting she was overreacting to a threat assessment. He'd been gone by lunch. The third had tried to flirt with her, clearly seeing dollar signs, and had been escorted out by security within an hour. The fourth, a woman named Rachel, had actually shown promise until she'd cornered Adriana in the elevator to ask for investment advice for her boyfriend's startup. When Adriana had refused, Rachel had called her a selfish bitch. That had been yesterday. Everyone wanted something. The man who entered was different from the start. Mason Reece was 40 years old, with silver threading through his dark hair and eyes that had seen too much. He was tall, over 6 feet, with the kind of lean, muscular build that came from years of discipline rather than vanity. His suit was off the rack but well-maintained, his shoes polished but worn at the heels. There was a small scar through his left eyebrow and another along his jawline. This was a man who'd been tested by life and had survived. He didn't flinch under her cold stare. Didn't shuffle nervously. Didn't try to fill the silence with flattery or small talk. Adriana circled him slowly, the way a predator might circle potential prey. "Let me guess," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Ex-military, probably divorced because the job came first. Definitely desperate for money since you're willing to babysit a spoiled rich girl who goes through bodyguards like tissues." "Widowed," Mason corrected quietly, his voice steady and deep. "Navy SEAL, 15 years. And I'm here to do a job, not to be your friend or your punching bag." Something in his tone made Adriana pause. There was no anger, no judgment, no eagerness to please, just facts, delivered with the kind of calm that came from absolute certainty. "My daughter needs stability," he continued, meeting her eyes directly. "Your security company pays well enough for me to give her that. That's the extent of my interest in you, Miss Werner." I don't care about your money, your company, or your disposition. I care about doing my job professionally and going home to my kid at the end of the day." For the first time in years, Adriana felt something crack in her carefully constructed armor. This man truly didn't care about her wealth or her status. He wasn't intimidated by her sharp edges. He wasn't trying to impress her or win her favor. He was just there, solid, unimpressed, real. It was refreshing and infuriating in equal measure. "Fine," she snapped, returning to her desk. "Stay out of my way. I have a board meeting in 20 minutes and I don't need you hovering." "I'll be outside the boardroom door," Mason replied. "That's my job." Over the next 3 weeks, Mason became a shadow in Adriana's life. He arrived 15 minutes before her each morning, having already swept her office and checked her schedule for security concerns. He stood outside every meeting, silent and watchful. He accompanied her to business dinners, positioned himself strategically at conferences, and drove her home each night without attempting conversation. But Adriana found herself watching him in ways she didn't quite understand. She noticed that he never checked his personal phone during work hours, though it buzzed constantly in his pocket. She noticed that he brought the same lunch every day, a sandwich, an apple, and a thermos of coffee, and ate it quickly and efficiently during her own lunch meetings. She noticed that he walked with a slight limp on his left side, barely perceptible but there nonetheless. She noticed that he had a small photograph tucked into his jacket pocket, the corner just visible, and that sometimes he'd touch it briefly when he thought no one was looking. One evening, as they were leaving late from the office, Adriana's curiosity got the better of her. "Don't you have a life?" she asked suddenly as they waited for the elevator. Mason glanced at her, his expression neutral. "I do. She's 7 years old and currently at her grandmother's house doing her spelling homework. Your daughter, Emma, she's the reason I wake up every morning." His voice softened almost imperceptibly when he said his daughter's name. Adriana felt a strange pang in her chest. "Must be nice," she said, her tone more bitter than she'd intended. "Having someone who loves you for who you are, not what you have." The elevator doors opened, but Mason paused before stepping inside. He looked at her directly, and for the first time she saw something other than professional detachment in his eyes. It might have been pity or understanding or both. "Respectfully, Miss Werner, you've built walls so high that nobody could reach you even if they tried. How would you know the difference?" The words hit harder than any insult she'd ever received. Adriana stepped into the elevator without responding, her jaw clenched tight. Mason followed, and they rode down 47 floors in absolute silence. That night, alone in her penthouse with its floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist furniture, Adriana replayed his words over and over. She poured herself a glass of wine from a bottle that cost more than most people's monthly rent and stood at the window, looking out at the city that she'd conquered, but that had never felt like home. When had she become this person? This cold, suspicious woman who couldn't accept a compliment without searching for the hidden agenda. She thought back to her childhood, to her father's business partner who'd embezzled millions and nearly destroyed their family. To her college boyfriend who'd stolen her software code and launched his own company with it. To the endless parade of people who'd tried to use her, exploit her, or reduce her to nothing more than a bank account with legs. Her phone rang, breaking her reverie. It was her younger sister, Claire, calling from London. "You sound sad," Claire said immediately after Adriana answered. "I'm fine." "Liar, what's wrong?" Adriana sighed. "Do you think I'm a terrible person? What? Where is this coming from?" "My new bodyguard said I've built walls so high nobody can reach me." Claire was quiet for a moment. "Well, he's not wrong, but you had good reasons for building those walls, Addie. After everything you've been through. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe I've been hiding behind those reasons for so long that I've forgot how to be a human being." "You're one of the most human people I know," Claire said firmly. "You're just scared. And honestly, after the parade of assholes you've dealt with, who could blame you?" They talked for another hour, and by the end of the call, Adriana felt marginally better. But as she lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, Mason's words echoed in her mind. How would she know the difference between love and transaction if she never let anyone close enough to show her? The next morning, she made a decision. She would try to be less difficult. Not soft, she'd never be soft, but perhaps less hostile. Perhaps she'd actually have a conversation with the man who stood between her and danger every single day. It was a small decision, but it would change everything. The assassination attempt happened on a Thursday evening, 3 weeks after Adriana's resolution to be more approachable. She'd been making small efforts, asking Mason about his day, offering him coffee when she ordered some, even smiling occasionally. He'd responded with cautious professionalism, never quite warming up but no longer quite as cold. Adriana was working late on a merger deal that would expand Werner Technologies into the European market. It was nearly 9 o'clock, the office empty except for her and Mason, who stood by the door as always. The only sounds were the soft clicking of her keyboard and the distant hum of the building's ventilation system. "Don't you ever get bored?" Adriana asked suddenly, looking up from her computer. "Just standing there for hours." Mason's lips quirked in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "I spent 6 months on a surveillance mission in Afghanistan where my job was to watch a building for 18 hours a day. This is luxury." "That sounds horrible." "It was necessary." Adriana leaned back in her chair, studying him. "Do you miss it, the military?" "Some parts." Mason was quiet for a moment, and Adriana thought that might be the end of the conversation. But then he continued, "I miss the clarity. You always knew what the mission was. You always knew who your enemies were." "Real life is more complicated." "Tell me about it," Adriana muttered. "Half the people who smile at me in board meetings are probably plotting to steal my company. The other half, definitely plotting to steal my company." This time Mason did smile, a real one that transformed his serious face. "You're probably right." Before Adriana could respond, the office window exploded inward. Everything happened in slow motion and at lightning speed simultaneously. Glass sprayed across the room like glittering rain. Adriana saw Mason's expression change from relaxed to lethal in an instant. He was moving before her brain could process what was happening, crossing the 20 feet between them in what seemed like a single heartbeat. He hit her like a freight train, driving her to the ground behind her massive oak desk. His body covered hers completely, one hand on her head, pressing her face into his chest, the other reaching for the weapon at his hip. She felt the solid weight of him, the controlled strength, the absolute certainty of his movements, more gunfire. The sound was deafening, nothing like the movies. Bullets tore through the office, shredding her leather chairs, punching holes in the walls, shattering the modern art glass sculptures she'd paid a fortune for. Adriana's ears rang. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but press herself against Mason and pray. "Stay down," he commanded, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Don't move. Don't look up." The gunfire stopped. In the silence that followed, Adriana could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. She could feel Mason's breath against her hair, quick but controlled. She could smell his cologne mixed with cordite and fear. "Are you hurt?" His hands were already checking her for injuries, efficient and impersonal despite the intimacy of his touch. "And no, I don't think so." Adriana was shaking, her expensive suit covered in glass and plaster dust. "We need to move. Now." Mason pulled her up, keeping himself between her and the shattered window, and moved them quickly toward the stairwell. His weapon was drawn, his movements smooth and practiced. This was the soldier, not the bodyguard. This was the man trained to kill. They were halfway to the door when Adriana saw it, blood seeping through his shirt sleeve, spreading in a dark stain across the gray fabric. "You're shot." "I'm fine, keep moving." "Mason, move, Miss Werner, now." His tone left no room for argument. They made it to the stairwell, and Mason locked the door behind them before pulling out his phone. He made 3 calls in rapid succession, to 911, to his security company, and to someone he called simply Miller. His voice remained calm and professional throughout, giving precise details about the attack, their location, and the threat assessment. Only when he'd hung up did he allow himself to lean against the wall, his face going pale. "Let me see," Adriana demanded, reaching for his arm. "I said I'm fine, and I said let me see." She grabbed his arm and he hissed in pain. "Take off your jacket." "Miss Werner, my name is Adriana, and if you don't take off that jacket right now, I will rip it off myself." For the first time since she'd met him, Mason looked genuinely surprised. He shrugged out of his jacket, revealing a shirt sleeve soaked in blood. Adriana used her own jacket to apply pressure to the wound, her hands shaking. "You could have died," she whispered. "You have a daughter, Mason. You have Emma. You could have left her all alone." "That's the job," he said, but his voice had softened. "The job." Adriana felt tears burning her eyes, and she didn't know if it was shock or anger or something else entirely. "You have a 7-year-old daughter who needs her father, and you have a life worth protecting." Mason's eyes were steady on hers, unwavering, despite what you might think of yourself. The sound of police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. In the harsh, fluorescent lighting of the stairwell, With Mason's blood on her hands and her own heart threatening to beat out of her chest, Adriana realized something that terrified her more than the bullets had. This man, this quiet, damaged, devoted father, had thrown himself in front of death for her without hesitation. Not because of her money, not because of what she could do for him, but because he'd given his word to protect her, and his word meant everything. Nobody had ever chosen her safety over their own. Nobody had ever protected her like that. The police arrived minutes later, followed by paramedics who insisted on taking both of them to the hospital. Mason argued until he physically couldn't stand anymore, and the paramedics essentially forced him onto a stretcher. Adriana rode in the ambulance with him, refusing to let go of his hand. At the hospital, in the chaos of flashing lights and rushing medical personnel, Adriana gave her statement to the detectives. The shooter had fired from a building across the street. High-powered rifle, professional setup. They'd found the position but not the shooter. This wasn't random. This was planned, calculated, and meant to kill. "Who wants you dead, Miss Werner?" the lead detective asked. Adriana thought about her competitors, her disgruntled former employees, the business deals that had destroyed other companies. The list was longer than she wanted to admit. "I'll have my lawyers send over a list of potential threats," she said quietly. Hours later, sitting in a private waiting room while Mason was in surgery to remove the bullet from his arm, Adriana finally let herself fall apart. She put her head in her hands and sobbed, her whole body shaking with the release of terror and adrenaline and something else she couldn't name. Jennifer arrived with a change of clothes and Adriana's phone. "The board is convening an emergency meeting," she said quietly. "They want to discuss increased security measures and cancel everything tomorrow," Adriana interrupted. "I'm not leaving this hospital until I know he's okay." Jennifer looked at her boss with something like understanding. "Of course, Miss Werner." When the surgeon finally emerged, Mason was stable. The bullet had caused muscle damage but missed the bone and major blood vessels. He'd need physical therapy, but he'd make a full recovery. He was asking for his daughter. "Tell him Emma is safe," the surgeon said. "His security company has her under protection. Her grandmother's with her." Adriana waited until they moved Mason to a private room before she went to see him. He was awake, his arm heavily bandaged, looking exhausted but alert. When he saw her, something flickered across his face, relief maybe or concern. "You should go home," he said. "You've had a traumatic experience." "So have you. I've been shot before. That doesn't make it better." Adriana sat in the chair beside his bed. "Thank you for what you did. It's my job." "Stop saying that." Her voice cracked. "It's more than a job. You risked your life. You have Emma and you still—" "Emma is exactly why I did it," Mason interrupted quietly. "Sarah, my wife, she made me promise something before she died. She made me promise that I'd never become so bitter about losing her that I stopped believing people were worth saving, that I'd remember kindness, that I'd protect people who needed protecting." He met Adriana's eyes. "You needed protecting. I'm not worth more than your daughter having a father." "That's not for you to decide." His voice was gentle but firm. "And for what it's worth, I think you're worth a lot more than you give yourself credit for." Adriana felt tears threatening again. She stood abruptly. "I should let you rest. I'll have my lawyers handle everything with the security company, make sure your medical bills are covered." "Adriana." It was the first time he'd used her first name. "Thank you for staying." She nodded, not trusting her voice, and left before he could see her cry. That night, lying alone in a hotel room because she refused to return to her penthouse, Adriana couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the moment of the attack, the sound of shattering glass, the weight of Mason's body covering hers, the absolute certainty that if he hadn't been there, she would be dead. And underneath all of that was a terrifying new feeling that she'd spent her entire adult life avoiding. She was starting to care about someone. The assassination attempt had been orchestrated by Chen Zhao, a Chinese national and former business partner who'd lost everything when Adriana had exposed his company's practice of stealing intellectual property. He'd blamed her for his downfall and hired a professional to eliminate her. The FBI arrested him 3 days after the attack, and he was facing multiple federal charges. But despite the threat being neutralized, Adriana insisted Mason stay on as her bodyguard. She tripled his salary, arranged for the best physical therapists to work with him, and even sent flowers to Emma with a note saying her daddy was a hero. Mason returned to work 2 weeks later, his arm still in a sling but otherwise recovered. Adriana had expected things to go back to normal, professional distance, silent observation, the carefully maintained boundaries they'd established. Instead, everything had changed. "How's the arm?" she asked the first morning he was back. "Healing well. Should be back to full strength in another month." "Good. I got you something." Adriana pulled a small box from her desk drawer, suddenly feeling ridiculously nervous. "It's nothing big, I just thought." Inside the box was a watch. Not an expensive designer piece, but a tactical watch designed for military use with all the features a bodyguard might need. "Your old one broke during the attack," Adriana explained quickly. "I noticed, so I replaced it. Is that okay?" "I can return it if..." "It's perfect." Mason's voice was rough. "Thank you." Over the following weeks, the walls between them began to crumble in small, almost imperceptible ways. Adriana started asking Mason questions about his life, and he started answering. She learned that his wife Sarah had been a pediatric nurse, that they'd met at a military hospital when he was recovering from a training injury, that they'd been married for 8 years before the cancer took her. "She was the best person I've ever known," Mason told her one evening as they worked late. "Patient, kind, always seeing the best in people. Emma is just like her." "I'd like to meet her," Adriana said, then immediately regretted it. "Emma, I mean, if that's appropriate, I don't want to overstep." Mason was quiet for a long moment. "She's been asking about you. She saw the flowers you sent and wants to know who the nice lady is who thinks I'm a hero." "You are a hero." "I'm just a man trying to do right by his kid." 2 days later, Mason brought Emma to the office on a Saturday when Adriana was catching up on work. The 7-year-old was small for her age, with long dark hair in pigtails and her father's serious brown eyes. She studied Adriana carefully from the doorway. "You're the lady my daddy protects," Emma said. "I am," Adriana replied, suddenly nervous. She'd negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, but this child's opinion mattered in a way that terrified her. "Are you nice to him?" The question was so direct, so earnest that Adriana had to smile. "I'm trying to be. I wasn't very nice at first." Emma nodded solemnly, as if this confirmed something she'd suspected. "Daddy says you're learning. He says everybody gets scared sometimes, and that's okay. Your daddy is very wise. Can I see your office?" "Daddy says you have a big desk and a view of the whole city." Adriana spent the next hour giving Emma a tour of Werner Technologies. She showed her the server rooms. "They're very loud," Emma observed critically. "The break room, why don't you have better snacks?" And finally her office, which had been completely repaired after the attack. Emma ran to the windows, pressing her nose against the glass. "Wow, you can see everything. Daddy, look." Mason joined his daughter at the window, and Adriana watched them together. The tall, serious man and the chattering child, their heads bent close as Mason pointed out different landmarks. Something twisted in her chest, a longing so profound it took her breath away. This was a family. This was love. This was everything she'd convinced herself she didn't need. "Miss Adriana," Emma turned to her. "Can you come to my birthday party? It's in 2 weeks. We're going to have princess cake, and Daddy said I can invite anyone I want." Adriana glanced at Mason, who looked uncomfortable. "Emma, Miss Werner is very busy." "I'd love to," Adriana interrupted. "What kind of princess cake?" Emma's face lit up like sunshine. "Elsa from Frozen. Do you like Frozen?" "I've never seen it." The child looked scandalized. "Daddy, she's never seen Frozen. That's so sad." And that was how Adriana found herself, 3 days later, sitting in Mason's modest suburban home watching a Disney movie with a 7-year-old girl who provided running commentary throughout, and a father who kept sneaking glances at her, as if trying to figure out if she was real. The house was small but immaculate, filled with photographs of Sarah, a beautiful woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. Adriana felt like an intruder at first, surrounded by evidence of the life Mason had built and lost. But Emma was so enthusiastic, so open, that it was impossible to maintain distance. "My mommy loved this movie," Emma said during one of the songs. "She used to sing this part." The child's voice wavered slightly, and Mason pulled her close. "She had a beautiful voice," he said softly. "Not as beautiful as Miss Adriana," Emma declared. "You should hear her talk in meetings, Daddy. She sounds like a queen." Adriana felt her eyes burning. This child, who'd lost her mother, who had every reason to be bitter or closed off, was so full of generosity and love. And Mason, who'd lost his wife, who'd been through hell, was raising her to be kind and open and brave. They were extraordinary, and Adriana had no idea what she'd done to deserve being welcomed into their lives. After the movie, Emma fell asleep on the couch. Mason carried her to bed, and when he returned, Adriana was looking at the photographs on the mantel. She was beautiful, Adriana said, studying a wedding photo of Mason and Sarah. She was everything. Mason stood beside her. I don't talk about her much because it still hurts, but I want you to know she's not a ghost I'm competing with or a memory I'm trying to replace. She was real and she was important and she'll always be part of our lives. I wouldn't want it any other way, Adriana said honestly. She made you who you are. She gave you Emma. That's not something to hide or be ashamed of. Mason turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. You're different than I thought you'd be. Different how? Softer, kinder, more. He trailed off, seeming to search for the word. Human, Adriana offered with a self-deprecating smile. Real, Mason corrected. When I first met you, I thought you were just another rich person playing at life. But you're not. You're someone who's been hurt and learned to protect yourself. I understand that. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, surrounded by the evidence of Mason's past and the possibility of something new. I should go, Adriana said finally. Thank you for letting me into your home, into Emma's life. Thank you for coming. It meant a lot to her, to both of us. As Adriana drove home that night in her own car for once, without Mason in the driver's seat, she realized she was happy. Genuinely, simply happy in a way she hadn't been in years, maybe ever. And that's when she realized the terrifying truth. She was falling in love with Mason Reece. The realization hit Adriana like a freight train over the following weeks. Suddenly, every interaction with Mason took on new meaning. The way he opened doors for her wasn't patronizing, it was thoughtful. The way he remembered how she took her coffee wasn't just professional observation, it was care. The way he smiled when she made Emma laugh wasn't just approval, it was something deeper, warmer, infinitely more dangerous. She found herself dressing more carefully in the mornings, choosing colors she knew he liked. She caught herself looking for excuses to work late, just to spend more time with him. She started going to Emma's school events, the spelling bee, the class art show, a soccer game where Emma spent more time picking dandelions than playing, and feeling her heart expand every time the little girl waved at her from the field. And then James Park, her CFO and closest business confidant for 8 years, walked into her office with an ultimatum that shattered her newfound happiness. Sign over 30% of the company to me, James said, sliding a folder across her desk. Or I'll release these financial records that will destroy Werner Technologies. Adriana's blood ran cold as she flipped through the documents. They were sophisticated forgeries, doctored spreadsheets and falsified reports suggesting she'd been embezzling millions from the company. Even if she could prove they were fake, which would take months and cost a fortune, the scandal would devastate the company. Investors would flee. Stock prices would crash. Competitors would circle like sharks. James, we've worked together for 8 years, Adriana said, her voice shaking with a mixture of rage and betrayal. I trusted you. I made you CFO when everyone said you were too young. I gave you stock options worth millions. And I've watched you take all the credit, all the glory, all the magazine covers while I did the real work. James's face was twisted with resentment. You think you're so special, Adriana. The brilliant CEO, the tech visionary. But I've been carrying this company for years. It's time I got what I deserve. This is about ego, about credit. This is about fairness. Sign the papers or by Monday morning, every media outlet in the country will have these files. Your choice. He left, and Adriana sat frozen at her desk. She had 48 hours to decide. Give up a third of her company to a traitor, or watch everything she'd built crumble around her. Mason appeared in the doorway moments later. He must have seen James leave. What happened? Adriana told him everything, her voice breaking as she explained the betrayal. He was my friend, or I thought he was. We had dinner together. We celebrated wins together. I went to his wedding, for God's sake. She laughed bitterly. Turns out I was right all along. Everyone has an angle. Everyone wants something. Not everyone, Mason said firmly, crossing to her desk. Really? Name one person who doesn't want something from me. Mason was quiet for a moment. Emma asked about you yesterday. She wanted to know when you'd come over again. She misses you. She's been drawing pictures of you at school, you and her and me together. She showed me one yesterday where we're all holding hands at the park. The words hit Adriana like a physical blow. Emma missed her. Emma was drawing pictures of them as a family. Emma, who'd already lost one mother, was opening her heart to Adriana without reservation or calculation. Mason, I need to tell you something. Adriana stood, her hands shaking. When you threw yourself in front of those bullets, when you chose to protect me without hesitation, something changed. And spending time with you and Emma these past weeks, watching you be an incredible father, seeing the way you honor Sarah's memory while still living fully. I've realized something terrifying. Adriana, I'm in love with you. The words tumbled out in a rush, desperate and raw. I've never felt this way about anyone. I wake up thinking about you. I go to sleep replaying conversations we've had. When Emma laughs, I feel this warmth in my chest that I can't explain. I find myself wanting to know everything about you, what you dream about, what scares you, what makes you happy. And it terrifies me because I've spent my entire life protecting myself from this exact feeling, and now it's here and I can't stop it and I don't want to stop it. Mason's face had gone carefully blank. He took a step back and Adriana felt her heart sink. You don't mean that, he said quietly. What? Yes, I do, Mason. No, he shook his head, his voice harder now. You're vulnerable right now. You've been betrayed by someone you trusted. Your company is under threat. You're confusing gratitude and proximity with something else. Adriana felt like she'd been slapped. I know the difference between gratitude and love, Mason. Do you? His eyes were dark, unreadable. Adriana, you've spent years convincing yourself that everyone wants something from you. Now suddenly, after a few weeks of normalcy, you're in love with your employee. With a man who has a 7-year-old daughter and a dead wife's ghost he's still carrying around. I don't care about any of that. You should care. Mason's composure cracked, his voice rising. Emma has already lost one mother. I can't let her get attached to someone who's going to realize this was all a mistake in a few months. I can't let her call you mom and then watch you walk away when reality sets in. This isn't a mistake. Mason, it doesn't matter what you think you feel. He cut her off, his jaw tight. This can't happen. I won't let it happen. So what, you feel nothing for me? Adriana's voice cracked. All those conversations, those moments we've shared, they meant nothing. Mason looked away, his hands clenched into fists. It doesn't matter what I feel. It's the only thing that matters. I buried my wife 2 years ago. Mason's voice broke, and suddenly the professional mask was gone, revealing the raw pain underneath. I watched her die slowly, day by day, while she begged me to promise I'd be okay, that Emma would be okay. I held her hand while she took her last breath. I had to explain to a 5-year-old why mommy wasn't coming home. Do you have any idea what that does to a person? Tears were streaming down Adriana's face. Mason, I promised Sarah I'd protect Emma, that I'd give her stability, security, a good life. I can't drag her into something that's going to fall apart when you realize what a mess this would be. When you realize that my life is school pickups and bedtime stories and nothing like the glamorous world you're used to. That's not fair. You're making assumptions about what I want. Am I? He turned back to her, his eyes bright with unshed tears. You live in a penthouse worth $20 million. You fly first class to meetings in Paris and Tokyo. You wear clothes that cost more than my mortgage payment. And I'm a widower raising a kid in a 3-bedroom house in the suburbs. We're from different worlds, Adriana. Money doesn't matter to me, not when it comes to this. Maybe not now, but in 6 months, a year, when the novelty wears off and you're tired of pretending to be someone you're not. Mason's voice was raw. I can't risk Emma's heart on a maybe, I won't. So you're just going to decide for both of us, for all 3 of us. Adriana's voice rose. What about what I want? What about what Emma wants? Emma is 7 years old. She doesn't know what she wants. She wants to be loved. She wants a family. And so do you, but you're too scared to admit it. The silence that followed was deafening. Mason stared at her, his chest heaving, his face a mask of pain and fear and anger. I need you to leave, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Mason, please just go. Adriana grabbed her purse with shaking hands and walked to the door. She turned back one last time, hoping he'd call her back, hoping he'd changed his mind. But Mason had already turned away, his shoulders rigid, his hands braced against her desk as if it was the only thing holding him up. Adriana left, and for the first time in her adult life, she understood what it meant to have your heart broken. The next morning, Adriana arrived at her office to find a resignation letter on her desk. The letterhead was from Mason's security company, and the message was brutally professional. Effective immediately, Mason Reece was resigning from his position as her personal bodyguard. A replacement, highly qualified with 15 years of Secret Service experience, would begin the following Monday. Adriana stared at the letter until the words blurred. He was really doing this. He was walking away, not just from whatever was between them, but from her life entirely. When Mason arrived for what would be his last day, Adriana was waiting for him. You're quitting, she said, her voice flat. It's for the best. Mason wouldn't meet her eyes. I've already recommended a replacement. Daniel Torr's ex-Secret Service, excellent credentials, you'll be in good hands. I don't want a replacement, I want you to stay. That's not possible anymore, not after what you said. So you're just going to run away? Adriana's voice rose despite her attempts to control it. I finally opened my heart to someone and you're punishing me for it. I'm protecting my daughter. Mason's control slipped, his voice sharp. Do you understand what it's like watching her bond with you? She talks about you constantly. She asks when you're coming over. She drew a picture of the three of us at school yesterday. He pulled a crumpled paper from his jacket pocket. Look at this. Adriana took the drawing with trembling hands. 3 stick figures stood in front of a house. One tall figure labeled Daddy, a small one labeled Emma, and another tall figure labeled Miss Adriana. They were all holding hands with a sun shining overhead and flowers at their feet. Emma had drawn hearts around all 3 of them. She's already in love with you too, Mason said quietly, his voice breaking. And when this inevitably falls apart, it won't just be me picking up the pieces. It'll be a 7-year-old girl who's already lost her mother, losing someone else she started to see as family. Adriana stared at the drawing, tears blurring her vision. What if it doesn't fall apart? You can't promise that. No one can promise that. That's what love is, Mason. It's a risk. It's choosing to be vulnerable even when you're terrified. I already took that risk once, with Sarah. Mason's eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted, and losing her nearly destroyed me. The only reason I survived was because Emma needed me, because I couldn't fall apart when she needed a parent. He took a shaky breath. I can't go through that again. I can't let Emma go through that again. I'm not asking you to. Aren't you? He met her eyes finally. What happens when you get tired of playing house? When the novelty wears off and you realize that my life is parent-teacher conferences and grocery shopping and arguing about bedtime? When you remember that you're a billionaire CEO and I'm just a bodyguard with more baggage than any person should have to carry. That's not fair, Mason. You're putting words in my mouth, assuming the worst. What's not fair is you expecting me to risk my daughter's heart on a maybe. Mason picked up his resignation letter. I'll stay until tours starts on Monday. After that, I think it's best if we don't see each other anymore, for everyone's sake. Even if I'm miserable without you. Adriana whispered. Mason paused at the door, his back to her. When he spoke, his voice was so quiet she almost didn't hear him. Better miserable than broken, Miss Werner. The use of her formal name felt like a knife to the heart. They were back to that. Employer and employee, nothing more. For the next 5 days, Mason maintained absolute professional distance. He didn't meet her eyes, didn't engage in conversation beyond the strictly necessary. Positioned himself as far away from her as security allowed. When Emma called during lunch one day, Adriana could hear the little girl's voice asking about her through the phone. Mason's face crumbled for just a moment before he turned away, telling his daughter that Miss Adriana was very busy with work. Adriana threw herself into fighting James's blackmail. Her lawyer, Margaret Chen, had a plan. They would pretend to comply with his demands while secretly recording him and gathering evidence of his fraud. It was risky, dangerous even, but it was their best option. We need him to explicitly state his demands on tape, Margaret explained. Get him comfortable, confident. Let him think he's won. Then we'll have everything we need to bury him. The meeting was set for Saturday evening at Marcello's, an upscale Italian restaurant known for its private dining rooms. Adriana would wear a wire. Torres, her new bodyguard who'd started on Monday, would be at a nearby table, posing as a regular customer. The FBI would be monitoring from a van 2 blocks away. Mason had been explicitly told not to come. His last day was Friday, and he was no longer her concern. But Friday afternoon, as Adriana prepared to say goodbye to Mason for the last time, she couldn't let him leave without trying one more time. Mason, please, she said as he packed his personal items from the small office adjacent to hers. Don't do this. Don't throw away something real because you're scared. I'm not scared, he said, but his hands were shaking as he placed a framed photo of Emma in his bag. I'm being realistic. You're being a coward. Mason's jaw clenched. Excuse me. Sarah told you to be happy again, didn't she? Adriana stepped closer. Emma told me. She said her mother's last wish was for you to find love again, to let someone in. And here I am standing in front of you telling you that I love you and you're running away. Don't you dare bring Sarah into this. She's already in this. She's in every decision you make, every wall you build. And I'm not trying to replace her or compete with her memory. I'm just trying to love you. Adriana's voice cracked. But you won't let me. You won't even give us a chance. Mason grabbed his bag and headed for the door. "Goodbye, Miss Werner. I hope tours serves you well." "Mason!" The door closed with a quiet click, and Adriana was alone. She didn't cry. She'd cried enough over the past week. Instead, she sat at her desk, pulled out Emma's drawing, and stared at those 3 stick figures holding hands. A family that would never be. Saturday evening arrived with the weight of inevitability. Adriana dressed carefully in a dark navy suit, the wire hidden beneath her cream silk blouse. Tors briefed her in the car as they drove to Marcello's. "Stay calm," he instructed, his voice professional and steady. "Get James to explicitly state his demands on tape. Don't agree to anything specific, we want him to keep talking. The FBI is monitoring everything. If anything goes wrong, I'll be 3 tables away. Just say the code word predecessor, and I'll move in immediately." Adriana nodded, her mouth dry. Her hands were steady, but inside she felt like she was coming apart. She walked into Marcello's at exactly 7 o'clock. The restaurant was elegant, dimly lit with candles on every table and soft Italian music playing in the background. The maitre d', a thin man with slicked-back hair, led her to a private room in the back. James was already waiting, looking relaxed and confident in an expensive suit. A bottle of Barolo, her favorite wine, sat open on the table, 2 glasses already poured. "Adriana, so glad you could make it." James stood, gesturing to the chair across from him. "I ordered your favorite, shall we sit?" "Let's skip the pleasantries, James, I'm here to discuss your terms." "Always so direct. That's what I've always admired about you, even if it does make you difficult to work with." He sat down, taking a leisurely sip of wine. "But yes, let's talk business. Have a seat." Adriana sat, acutely aware of the wire against her skin. It felt like it was burning, surely visible, surely obvious. But James seemed completely relaxed, almost jovial. "So you'll sign?" he asked, swirling his wine. "I need certain guarantees first. I need to know that once I sign over 30% of Werner Technologies, this is over. No more threats, no more documents surfacing." Of course. I'm a businessman, Adriana, not a monster." "Once we have our agreement, I have no interest in destroying the company. After all, I'll own 1/3 of it." He smiled. "We'll be partners." "Then walk me through exactly what you want, the precise terms." She needed him to lay it all out clearly for the recording. James leaned forward, his confidence growing. 30% equity in Werner Technologies, transferred to a shell company I've established in the Cayman Islands. Position on the board with veto power over any major decisions, mergers, acquisitions, executive appointments. And a signing bonus of $10 million in cash to be paid within 48 hours of the transfer. That's a lot of money, James. It's what I deserve. I've been running that company while you took all the credit. The late nights, the difficult negotiations, the financial restructuring that saved us during the 2024 recession, that was all me. You just smiled for the cameras. His voice had taken on an edge of bitterness. "No more. I get what I've earned, or everyone learns what kind of person Adriana Werner really is." Adriana forced herself to remain calm. "And the documents, what guarantee do I have that they won't surface even after I sign? You have my word." "Your word isn't worth much right now, James." His smile hardened. "Then I suppose you'll have to trust me, just like I trusted you for 8 years while you walked all over me." As he spoke, Adriana noticed something that made her blood run cold. Through the partially open door, she could see 3 men in the main dining area. They weren't eating. They weren't talking. They were watching the private room. And they had the look of men who'd done violence before, hard eyes, scarred knuckles, the kind of stillness that came from military or prison experience. "James," Adriana said carefully, her heart beginning to race. "Who are those men?" His smile widened, and in that moment she saw the real James Park, not the loyal CFO she'd trusted, but someone capable of genuine malice. "Insurance," he said simply. He pulled a small device from his pocket, a radio frequency detector. It beeped insistently as he waved it in her direction. "I'm not an idiot, Adriana. I know you wouldn't just roll over. I figured you might try to record this conversation, maybe bring your new bodyguard as backup." The device continued to beep. "And I was right, you're wearing a wire." Adriana's heart stopped. The code word, she needed to say the code word. "My predecessor always said..." "Save it," James interrupted. He stood and the 3 men immediately entered the room. One of them grabbed Adriana's arm roughly, yanking her from her chair. Another pulled out a gun, the metal gleaming dully in the candlelight. Through the door, Adriana could see Tors rising from his table, reaching for his weapon. But James had planned for this too. "I wouldn't if I were you," James called out calmly. One of his men trained a gun on Tors. "Drop your weapon and kick it over here, or I'll have my associate shoot everyone in this restaurant, starting with the lovely couple on their anniversary dinner 2 tables over." Tors hesitated, his eyes meeting Adriana's. She could see the calculation happening. He was 1 man against 3 armed assailants with civilian casualties at risk. Slowly, he lowered his weapon and kicked it across the floor. "Excellent. Now have a seat and put your hands where I can see them." James turned back to Adriana. "Here's how this is going to work. You're going to sign the papers, right now. And then you're going to walk out of here and tell the FBI or police or whoever's listening that this was all a misunderstanding, that you've decided to bring me on as a partner willingly." "James, this is insane." "What's insane is thinking you could outsmart me." His composure finally cracked, rage bleeding through. "I've been planning this for 2 years, Adriana. 2 years of watching you parade around like you built Werner Technologies alone. I created the forgeries. I planted the breadcrumbs. I made sure every document looked authentic enough to destroy you if they went public." He placed a folder on the table, flipping it open to reveal transfer papers. "Sign, or my associates will ensure you don't walk out of here at all. And then they'll visit that charming little house you bought in the suburbs. 3 blocks from your former bodyguard's home. It would be such a tragedy if something happened to a retired SEAL and his young daughter." The threat against Mason and Emma sent ice through Adriana's veins. "You leave them alone, then sign." One of the armed men pressed the gun against her temple. Adriana's hands shook as she reached for the pen. She couldn't die here, not like this, not over money. She looked at Tors, now held at gunpoint by another of James's men, and thought about Mason, about Emma. About the life she'd wanted but had been too afraid to fight for until it was too late. Her fingers closed around the pen, and then the window exploded inward in a shower of glass. Mason came through like an avenging angel, using the chaos and surprise to his advantage. He moved with the deadly precision of his SEAL training, fast, efficient, brutal. The nearest gunman didn't even have time to turn before Mason had disarmed him with a devastating strike to the wrist, following through with an elbow to the temple that dropped the man instantly. The second gunman spun, trying to bring his weapon to bear, but Mason was already inside his guard. A quick series of strikes, throat, solar plexus, knee, and the man crumpled. Tors used the distraction to attack his own captor, wrestling for control of the gun. A shot rang out, deafening in the enclosed space, and Tors went down with a cry of pain. The third gunman had his weapon trained on Adriana, his finger tightening on the trigger. Time seemed to slow. Adriana saw Mason's eyes widen, saw him start to move toward her, knowing he wouldn't make it in time. But then FBI agents poured through every entrance. The front door, the kitchen, even through the same window Mason had used. The gunman hesitated for just a fraction of a second, and that was all Mason needed. He crossed the distance and took the man down with a brutal efficiency that reminded Adriana that before he was a bodyguard, before he was a father, he had been a weapon. James tried to run, but was tackled by 2 agents before he made it 3 steps. Within 30 seconds, the entire situation was secured. James and his associates were on the ground in handcuffs. Tors was being attended to by paramedics for a gunshot wound to his thigh, and FBI agents were reading everyone their rights. And through it all, Mason never left Adriana's side. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his hands checking her for injuries with the same desperate thoroughness he'd shown after the assassination attempt. "And no, I don't think so." Adriana was shaking, her expensive suit covered in glass and plaster dust. "You came. You weren't supposed to come, you quit." "I know." Mason pulled her close and she felt his heart hammering against her chest. "I was at home when Tors called to confirm the plan. And I realized I couldn't let someone else protect you. Not when," he stopped, his voice thick with emotion. "Not when what? Not when I'm in love with you too." The words hung in the air between them, more precious than any contract, more valuable than any company. Adriana pulled back to look at his face, searching for any sign that she'd misheard, that it was just adrenaline talking. "What did you say?" "I love you, Adriana." Mason's eyes were bright with unshed tears, his voice raw and honest. "I've been fighting it since the day you asked about Emma with genuine interest. Since you showed up at her school play covered in concrete dust because you refused to miss it. Since you sat on my couch watching Frozen and didn't run screaming from the chaos of my life. I love you and it scares me to death, but I'm more scared of losing you without ever having tried." Adriana kissed him, desperate and deep, pouring every ounce of feeling into it. Around them, FBI agents were reading Miranda rights, paramedics were treating Tor's gunshot wound, and police were securing the scene. But in that moment, none of it mattered. "You came for me," Adriana whispered against his lips. "I'll always come for you," Mason promised. "Even when I'm scared, even when I'm stupid. Even when I've convinced myself that staying away is somehow noble, I'll always come for you." An FBI agent approached, clearing her throat. "Miss Werner, we'll need your statement." Adriana nodded, but she didn't let go of Mason's hand. Not when she gave her statement. Not when they loaded James into a police car. Not when the paramedics insisted on checking her for injuries despite her protests. Later, much later, they sat in the back of an ambulance while a paramedic cleaned the small cuts on Adriana's arms from the flying glass. Tors had been taken to the hospital. The bullet had passed through cleanly, and he was expected to make a full recovery. "Emma's with my mother," Mason said quietly. "She doesn't know about any of this. I told her I had to work late." "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry you got dragged into this. Stop." Mason took her face in his hands. "I chose to be here. Just like I'm choosing this, choosing you, choosing to stop being afraid of everything that could go wrong and start focusing on everything that could go right." "What changed your mind?" "Emma, actually. After I left your office yesterday, I went home and she asked me why I was sad. I tried to tell her I wasn't, but you know Emma, she doesn't let you get away with lying." He smiled sadly. "She told me that her mom used to say the saddest people are the ones too scared to be happy. And she asked me if I was going to be scared forever, or if I was going to be brave enough to choose happiness. She's 7 years old and wiser than both of us combined. She really is." Mason's thumb traced along Adriana's cheekbone. "I'm sorry I pushed you away. I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry I made you feel like your love wasn't worth fighting for. I'm sorry, too, for not understanding how hard this was for you, for pushing when you needed space. I don't want space anymore." Mason's voice was firm. "I want you in my life, in Emma's life, in every part of my messy, complicated existence. I want to come home to you. I want to teach you how to make pancakes that don't turn out like hockey pucks. I want to argue about whose turn it is to help with homework and fall asleep next to you and wake up knowing you're there." Adriana felt tears streaming down her face. "I bought a house, 3 blocks from yours. I've been furnishing it, trying to make it feel like a home instead of just another empty space. There's a bedroom for Emma with bookshelves and a window seat, and a backyard big enough for a dog if she wants one." Mason stared at her. "You bought a house? I wanted to prove to you that I'm serious about this, about changing my life, about building something real." She laughed through her tears. "And then you quit and I thought maybe I'd just end up living in it alone, another monument to my terrible judgment. Show me." "What?" "The house. I want to see it. I want to see the life you're trying to build." So at midnight, still covered in glass dust and dried tears, Adriana took Mason to see the house. She unlocked the door and led him through rooms she'd furnished with care. Not expensive designer pieces meant to impress, but comfortable furniture meant to be lived in. Warm colors instead of stark whites. Photos on the walls instead of abstract art. A kitchen with mismatched mugs and a cookie jar shaped like a frog that Emma would love. And the bedroom she decorated for Emma. Walls painted a soft lavender, shelves filled with books, a desk for homework, and a window seat with cushions perfect for reading. Mason stood in the doorway of that room for a long moment, not saying anything. "If this is too much, if I've overstepped," Adriana started. "It's perfect," Mason said, his voice breaking. "It's absolutely perfect." He turned to her, and the expression on his face was something Adriana had never seen before, complete, unguarded love. "I'm still going to mess this up sometimes," he warned. "I'm still going to have days where the grief hits hard and I shut down. I'm still going to be overprotective of Emma and probably way too paranoid about security after tonight. I'm still going to wake up some mornings and be terrified that this is all too good to be true. And I'm still going to be a workaholic who doesn't always know how to express emotions. I'm still going to be terrible at cooking and probably mess up 100 parenting moments. I'm still going to have days where I doubt whether I'm good enough for you and Emma." Adriana stepped closer. "But I'm willing to try if you are. I'm willing to be messy and imperfect and scared as long as we're doing it together." Mason kissed her, soft and slow and full of promise. "Then let's be a disaster together." They stood in the house that would become their home, surrounded by the future Adriana had built in hope, and Mason was finally brave enough to accept. "One condition," Mason said as they stood in what would become their bedroom. "We tell Emma together. She's been through too much to have secrets kept from her." "Agreed. When?" "Tomorrow. I'll bring her here and we'll tell her together that we're going to be a family." He smiled. Fair warning, she's going to lose her mind with excitement. She's been planning our wedding since the day she met you. Our wedding? Oh yes, very detailed plans, purple theme. Cake shaped like a castle. She's already picked out her dress. Adriana laughed, the sound bright and free and full of joy. Then I guess we'd better not disappoint her. They spent the rest of the night talking, planning, dreaming about the future they were going to build together. As the sun began to rise over their new home, Mason pulled Adriana close. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For not giving up on me, for seeing past all my walls and fears, for loving Emma, for being brave enough for both of us until I could catch up." "We're even then," Adriana replied, "because you taught me what love actually looks like. You showed me that it's not a transaction or a weakness. You proved that some people are worth the risk." And in the golden light of dawn, in the house that represented everything they'd been too scared to hope for, two broken people chose to be whole together. But declarations made in the aftermath of trauma, in houses built on hope, aren't always enough to overcome years of fear and grief. Mason learned this 3 days after James's arrest, when the reality of what they were attempting began to sink in. The panic attack hit him on a Tuesday morning while he was making breakfast for Emma. One moment he was flipping pancakes, and the next he was on the floor, unable to breathe, his vision tunneling as memories crashed over him like waves. Sarah in the hospital bed, her hand in his as the monitors flatlined. The funeral, where he'd had to hold Emma while she sobbed for her mother. The first year of grief, when getting out of bed felt like climbing a mountain. The terror of being solely responsible for keeping another human being alive when he could barely keep himself alive. And now he was considering bringing someone else into that fragile ecosystem. Someone else Emma could lose. Someone else he could lose. Emma found him on the kitchen floor, still holding the spatula, tears streaming down his face. "Daddy," her voice was small, scared. "Are you sad about Mommy again?" "I'm okay, sweetheart," he managed, but his voice was shaking. "Just having a hard morning." But he wasn't okay. And over the next week, as the reality of choosing happiness over safety really set in, the fear began to win. He started pulling away from Adriana in small ways at first. Canceling dinner plans because of work commitments. Responding to her texts with brief, non-committal answers. Finding excuses why Emma couldn't visit the new house yet. Building back the walls he'd torn down in that midnight conversation. Adriana noticed, of course. She'd notice him pulling away even if she weren't a genius CEO who'd built an empire on reading people and situations. "Talk to me," she said one evening when he'd canceled their 3rd dinner in a row. Shown up at his house instead, refusing to be shut out. "What's going on?" "Nothing, I'm just busy." "Mason, please, I can see you running. Just tell me what you're afraid of." "I'm not afraid. Don't lie to me," Adriana's voice broke. "Don't stand there and lie when I can see the terror in your eyes, when I can feel you building walls between us. Just tell me the truth." Mason turned away, unable to meet her eyes. "I can't do this." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. "Can't do what?" Adriana's voice was barely above a whisper. "This, us, any of it." The words came out in a rush. "I thought I could after the restaurant, after everything we said, but I can't. I wake up every morning and I panic thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. All the ways I could lose you or Emma could lose you or we could mess her up by trying to force something that isn't going to work." "Force something," Adriana's voice rose. "Is that what you think we're doing? Forcing something? Aren't we? We're from completely different worlds, Adriana. You're a billionaire who's used to controlling everything. I'm a widower with PTSD and a kid who needs stability, not chaos. What happens in 6 months when you realize this isn't what you actually want? When the reality of school pickups and parent-teacher conferences and Emma's nightmares about her mother sets in? That's not fair. It's completely fair." Mason's control shattered. "You've never had to think about anyone but yourself. You've never had to put someone else's needs before your own wants. And now you're asking me to bet my daughter's emotional wulbup on the hope that you'll be different from every other person who's walked into our lives and walked back out." The words landed like physical blows. Adriana stepped back, her face pale. "Is that what you really think of me?" Her voice was steady, but Mason could see the tears gathering in her eyes. "That I'm selfish, that I'd walk away from Emma. I don't know, that's the problem." Mason was shouting now, years of grief and fear pouring out. "I don't know what you'll do in 6 months or a year. I don't know if you can handle the reality of what our life actually looks like, and I can't take that risk with Emma's heart. So you're taking the decision away from all of us. You're deciding for me, for Emma, for yourself that we're better off alone. I'm deciding that it's better to be lonely than destroyed." Mason's voice cracked. "I barely survived losing Sarah." If I lose you too, if Emma loses you too, I don't think we'll come back from that. Adriana wiped her eyes roughly. You're not even giving us a chance. You're so busy protecting yourself from potential pain that you're causing actual pain right now. Maybe that's what's best. For who? Not for Emma, who's already drawn pictures of us as a family. Not for me, who's bought a house and changed her entire life. Certainly not for you, who I can see is miserable. Adriana's voice was shaking now. The only person this is best for is your fear. Maybe my fear knows things my heart doesn't. Or maybe your fear is lying to you. Maybe it's telling you that being alone is safer when really it's just making you lonelier. Adriana was openly crying now. I love you, Mason. I love Emma. I'm terrified too, but I'm willing to try anyway. Why aren't you? Because you don't understand what it's like to lose everything. The words ripped out of him. You don't know what it's like to watch someone you love waste away, to hold their hand while they die, to have to tell your 5-year-old that mommy's never coming home. You don't know what it's like to wake up every day for months wishing you could die too, except you can't because someone needs you. The silence that followed was deafening. Mason was breathing hard, tears streaming down his face. Adriana looked like he'd struck her. You're right, she said finally, her voice eerily calm. I don't know what that's like. I've never lost someone the way you lost Sarah, but I do know what it's like to build walls so high that nobody can reach you. I know what it's like to be so afraid of being hurt that you hurt yourself first. And I know what it's like to finally find something real and watch it slip through your fingers because you're too scared to hold on. She grabbed her purse. I won't make you choose, Mason. I won't force you into something you're not ready for. But I need you to understand something. I'm not Sarah. I'm not going to die and leave you. I'm right here choosing you, and you're the one walking away. Adriana, I'll give you space, as much as you need, but I'm not giving up on Emma. Her voice was steel. That little girl has lost too many people. I won't be another adult who disappears from her life without explanation. I'll respect your wishes about us, but I'm still going to show up for her. If you have a problem with that, you'll have to tell me directly. She walked to the door, then turned back one last time. When you're done being afraid, I'll be 3 blocks away. In the house I bought for us, waiting. Then she was gone, and Mason was alone in the sudden silence. He sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. What had he done? He'd found someone who loved him, truly loved him, and he'd driven her away because he was too broken to accept it. Emma appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas. From her expression, she'd heard everything. Why did you make Miss Adriana leave? Her voice was small, wounded. Emma, sweetheart. She loves us, and you made her leave. Tears were rolling down Emma's face. Just like you're going to make everyone leave because you're too scared. That's not fair. It is fair. Emma stomped her foot, 7 years old and furious. Mommy told you to be happy. She told you to find someone to love, and you did, and now you're being mean to her because you're scared. Emma, you don't understand. I understand that you're sad all the time. I understand that Miss Adriana makes you smile. I understand that I love her and want her to be my family, and you won't let her. Emma was sobbing now. You're the grown-up. You're supposed to be brave. She ran to her room, slamming the door. Mason sat alone in his living room, the house quiet except for the sound of his daughter crying in her bedroom. He looked at the photograph of Sarah on the mantel, her bright smile, her kind eyes, everything he'd lost. What would she say to him now? What would Sarah think of him choosing fear over love, loneliness over connection, survival over actually living? He knew the answer. Sarah would be disappointed in him. Not angry, never angry. Just sad that he was wasting the life she'd fought so hard to stay part of. But knowing what Sarah would want and being able to do it were 2 entirely different things. Because the fear was real. The possibility of loss was real. And Mason didn't know if he was strong enough to survive it again. So he sat in the dark, in the house that had become a shrine to grief instead of a home, and let the fear win. For now. Adriana kept her word. She gave Mason space, but she showed up for Emma. She was there when Emma's class performed in the school talent show, sitting in the audience while Mason stood in the back, too proud to sit beside her but unable to stay away. She was there for the parent-student art exhibition, admiring Emma's finger paintings and watercolors. She took Emma for ice cream every Thursday after school, with Mason's mother's permission, and listened to the 7-year-old talk about her day, her friends, her feelings. And through Emma, Adriana learned just how much her absence was affecting Mason. Daddy doesn't sleep good anymore, Emma confided one Thursday over chocolate ice cream. I hear him walking around at night, and sometimes I hear him crying. Adriana's throat tightened. I'm sorry, sweetheart. It's not your fault. It's his fault for being dumb. Emma swung her legs, her expression serious. Grandma says sometimes grown-ups need help being brave, so I'm going to help him. Emma, you don't need to. Yes, I do, because I want you to be my family. The little girl looked at Adriana with absolute conviction. And families help each other. 3 weeks after Mason had pushed Adriana away, Emma put her plan into action. She waited until Mason was having a particularly bad morning. She'd heard him packing all night, and his eyes were red and swollen at breakfast. He'd burned the pancakes and snapped at her when she'd asked about Adriana, then immediately apologized with tears in his eyes. That's when Emma knew it was time. "Daddy," she said, her voice small but determined. "I wrote you a letter. Grandma helped me with the spelling." Mason took the envelope, his hands shaking slightly. Inside was a piece of lined paper covered in Emma's careful 7-year-old handwriting, with corrections in his mother's neat script above the mistakes. "Dear Daddy, I know you're scared. Grandma told me that grown-ups get scared just like kids do, even though they pretend they don't. She said you're scared because Mommy died and you don't want to lose anyone else. But Daddy, I'm scared too. I'm scared that you're going to be sad forever. I'm scared that you'll never let anyone love us again. I'm scared that Miss Adriana will stop coming to see me because you're being mean to her. Before Mommy died, she told me something. She said that Daddy would find someone new to love someday and that it was okay. She said loving someone new doesn't mean forgetting the person who died. She said it means your heart gets bigger, not that the old love gets smaller. I think Mommy meant Miss Adriana. I think she would like Miss Adriana because Miss Adriana makes you smile the real smile, not the pretend one you do for me when you're sad. I love Miss Adriana, Daddy, and I think you love her too, even if you're too scared to say it. Please stop being scared. Please let her be our family. Mommy would want you to be happy. I want you to be happy. And Miss Adriana makes you happy. Please, Daddy, be brave. Love, Emma. P.S. Grandma says if you don't fix this, she's going to come over and yell at you. And you know how loud Grandma can yell." Mason read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down his face. His daughter, his wise, brave, 7-year-old daughter, understood what he'd been too broken to see. Sarah had told him to find love again. Emma was begging him to choose happiness, and he'd been so consumed by fear that he'd been hurting the very people he was trying to protect. "Emma," he said, his voice thick, "come here, sweetheart." She climbed into his lap, and he held her tight, this little girl who'd lost her mother but somehow still had the courage to love without reservation. "You're right," he whispered into her hair. "You're absolutely right. I've been dumb. I've been scared and dumb, and I've hurt someone who doesn't deserve to be hurt. So you'll fix it." "I'll try. I don't know if she'll forgive me." "She will," Emma said with absolute confidence, "because she loves us. I can tell." That night, after Emma was asleep, Mason sat down with his mother in the kitchen. "You helped her write that letter," he said. "I helped with the spelling. The words were all hers." His mother, Margaret Reece, studied him with the same sharp eyes that had seen through every excuse and lie he'd ever told. "That child has more wisdom in her little finger than most adults have in their whole body." "I know. So, what are you going to do about it?" Mason ran his hands through his hair. "I don't know, Mom. I've messed this up so badly. I told Adriana I couldn't do this. I pushed her away. I said terrible things." "Did you mean them?" "No, God no. I was scared and I lashed out." "Then you apologize, you grovel. You show up and tell her the truth, that you're terrified and broken and still grieving, but that you love her anyway, that you want to try." Margaret reached across the table and took his hand. "Mason, I loved Sarah like my own daughter. Watching her die nearly destroyed me too, but she wouldn't want this for you. She wouldn't want you to stop living because she couldn't." "I know. I just don't know if I'm strong enough." "You survived 15 years as a Navy SEAL. You survived watching your wife die. You've raised an incredible daughter on your own. You're stronger than you think." She squeezed his hand. "The question isn't whether you're strong enough. It's whether you're brave enough to use that strength for something other than survival." The next morning, Mason called Tors. "I need a favor." Name it. I need to know Adriana's schedule for tomorrow, and I need you to make sure she's at the house at 7 p.m. The new house, 3 blocks from mine. Tors was quiet for a moment. You're going to fix this. I'm going to try. I don't know if it'll work. It'll work, Tors said. Trust me, I've been watching her for 3 weeks. She's miserable without you. Just be honest with her. That's all she wants. Mason spent the entire next day preparing. He picked up Emma from school early and took her to the house Adriana had bought for them. The house that represented everything he'd been too afraid to accept. Are we going to live here? Emma asked, her eyes wide as she explored the bedroom Adriana had decorated for her. If Miss Adriana forgives Daddy for being an idiot, then yes, we're going to live here. She'll forgive you, Emma said confidently, running her hands over the bookshelves filled with books Adriana had carefully selected. Love always forgives. Mason hoped his daughter was right. At exactly 7 p.m., Adriana's car pulled into the driveway. Mason watched from the window as she got out, looking tired and sad. She'd lost weight, he noticed with a pang of guilt. There were dark circles under her eyes, and when she walked toward the house, she moved like someone carrying an invisible weight. Tors had told her there was a security concern that required her immediate attention at the property. It was a lie, but a necessary one. Adriana opened the door and stopped dead. The house was transformed. Candles flickered on every surface. Soft music played from hidden speakers. And in the center of the living room stood Mason and Emma, both dressed nicely, both looking nervous. What's going on? Adriana asked, her voice guarded. We need to talk, Mason said. Please, just give me 5 minutes. Adriana looked like she might leave, but then Emma ran forward, grabbing her hand. Please stay, Miss Adriana. Please. Daddy has something to say, and it's really important. Adriana's expression softened as she looked at Emma. Okay, sweetheart, I'll stay. Emma led her to the couch, then went to stand beside her father. They'd practiced this. Emma would start, then Mason would finish. Miss Adriana, Emma began, her voice clear and proud. I wrote Daddy a letter telling him he was being dumb, and he finally listened. Despite everything, Adriana smiled. Did he? I did, Mason confirmed. He took a deep breath, his prepared speech suddenly feeling inadequate. Adriana, I owe you the biggest apology of my life. What I said to you, how I treated you, there's no excuse. I was scared and broken, and I hurt you because I was too much of a coward to face my own feelings. Mason, please let me finish. I need to say this. He stepped closer, Emma moving with him. You were right about everything. I was choosing fear over happiness. I was so busy protecting myself from potential pain that I was causing real pain. I was teaching Emma that love isn't worth the risk, when the truth is that you're worth every risk. Adriana's eyes were filling with tears. You really hurt me. I know, and I'm so sorry. Mason's voice broke. I'm sorry for pushing you away. I'm sorry for making you feel like your love wasn't valuable. I'm sorry for all the nights you spent alone in this house that you bought for us, wondering if I'd ever be brave enough to accept it. How did you know? Emma told me. She told me about your ice cream dates, about the conversations you've been having. She told me that you've been showing up for her even when I was too stupid to show up for you. Mason knelt down in front of Adriana, taking her hands. And that's when I realized what an incredible person you are. You kept your word. Even when I hurt you, even when I gave you every reason to walk away, you kept showing up for my daughter because you understood what she needed. Tears were streaming down Adriana's face now. I love her. Of course I showed up. I love you too, Miss Adriana, Emma said, climbing onto the couch beside her. Even when Daddy was being dumb. Adriana laughed through her tears, pulling Emma close. I love you too, sweetheart. And me? Mason asked quietly. Do you still love me, even after everything I've put you through? Adriana looked at him for a long moment. Mason could see her weighing it, considering whether he deserved another chance, whether she could trust him not to run again. I need to know, she said finally. Are you going to do this again? The next time you get scared, are you going to push me away? Probably, Mason admitted. Because I'm human and flawed and I'm still learning how to do this. But the difference is, now I know that running doesn't protect anyone. It just makes everyone miserable. So the next time I get scared, and I will get scared, I promise to talk to you about it instead of running. I promise to fight through the fear instead of letting it win. And Emma, what if something happens to me? What if? Then we'll grieve, Mason said simply. And it will be awful and terrible and it might break us. But at least we'll have had you in our lives. At least we'll have loved you and been loved by you. That's worth the risk, Adriana. You're worth the risk. Mommy told Daddy to be happy, Emma added. And you make him happy. You make both of us happy. Adriana looked between them, this broken man and his wise daughter, both offering her a place in their lives, in their hearts. She thought about the lonely months she'd spent building her empire with no one to share it with. She thought about the empty penthouse she'd finally sold. She thought about all the times she'd been hurt and betrayed and learned to trust no one. And then she thought about Mason throwing himself in front of bullets for her. About Emma's gap-toothed smile and her drawings of their family. About pancakes and Disney movies and the terrifying, beautiful possibility of being part of something real. I'm scared too, she whispered. I'm terrified that I'll mess this up, that I'll be a terrible partner and an even worse mother figure, that I'll let you both down. Then we'll be scared together, Mason said. We'll mess up together, we'll figure it out together, because that's what families do. Is that what we are, a family? Emma nodded enthusiastically. If you say yes, we're a family if you say yes. Adriana looked around the living room of the house she'd bought in hope. She saw the future she'd dared to dream of, messy and complicated and imperfect, and absolutely perfect. Yes, she said, pulling them both close. Yes, we're a family. Mason kissed her, soft and reverent and full of promise. When they broke apart, Emma was cheering and jumping on the couch. Does this mean we can get a dog now? The 7-year-old asked. Absolutely not, both adults said in unison, then looked at each other and laughed. They spent the evening in their house, making plans and setting boundaries, and having the honest conversations they should have had weeks ago. Mason talked about his grief, about the therapy he was going to start. Adriana talked about her worries about being a stepmother, about her fear of failing Emma. Emma talked about wanting a purple bedroom and a dog and maybe a baby brother or sister someday. Let's start with just being a family, Adriana said, ruffling Emma's hair. We can discuss the rest later. As Emma dozed off on the couch between them, worn out from excitement, Mason took Adriana's hand. I'm still going to have bad days, he warned. Days when the grief hits hard. And I'm still going to have days when I'm difficult and controlling and I work too much, Adriana replied. We're both disasters. Then we'll be disasters together. I can live with that. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching Emma sleep, marveling at this child, who'd had the wisdom to save them both from their own fear. Thank you, Mason said finally. For what? For not giving up on us. For seeing past my walls and my fear and my stupidity, for loving Emma, for being patient with me even when I didn't deserve it. Thank you for finally being brave enough to let me in, Adriana replied. For choosing happiness over safety, for giving us a chance. I love you. Adriana Werner. I love you too, Mason Reece. And in that moment, in the house that represented everything they'd been too scared to hope for, two broken people became whole together. The Werner Technologies boardroom was packed with executives, investors, and journalists for the quarterly earnings announcement. Adriana stood at the head of the table, radiating confidence as she outlined the company's expansion into renewable energy technology. The quarterly earnings were up 45%. The new CFO, promoted from within after James Park's arrest, had implemented transparent oversight procedures that were already being copied by other tech companies. Werner Technologies had emerged from the scandal stronger and more innovative than ever. But the most surprising news came at the end of the presentation. Finally, Adriana said, her eyes finding Mason, who stood at the back of the room in his reinstated position as her head of security. I'm announcing a restructuring of my role as CEO. I'll be stepping back from day-to-day operations to focus on strategic vision and long-term innovation. This will allow me to maintain a better work-life balance, which has become a priority for me and my family." The room buzzed with surprised murmurs. Adriana Werner, the workaholic CEO who once famously said she didn't believe in work-life balance, was actually practicing it. She smiled, catching Mason's eye. He smiled back, the real smile, not the professional one, the smile that was just for her. After the meeting, as journalists clamored for interviews and board members congratulated her on another successful quarter, Adriana slipped away to her office where Mason was waiting. "You did great," he said, pulling her close. "Thanks to you, and Emma, and your mother, who's probably spoiling our daughter rotten right now while we're at work." "Our daughter," Mason repeated, his voice soft. "I love hearing you say that." They'd officially moved into the house 2 months ago, combining their lives in ways both practical and profound. Emma's belongings mingled with Adriana's. Mason's coffee mugs sat next to Adriana's expensive tea collection. Sarah's photo still held a place of honor on the mantle, now surrounded by new photos of their blended family. It wasn't always easy. There were still hard days when Mason's grief surfaced unexpectedly. There were still moments when Adriana reverted to her old controlling ways. There were still nights when Emma had nightmares about losing another parent. But they faced it together. "I have something for you," Mason said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Adriana's breath caught. "Mason." "Before you panic, it's not what you think." "Well, it is what you think, but—" He stopped, laughing nervously. "I'm screwing this up." He opened the box, revealing a simple diamond ring, not ostentatious or designed to impress anyone but her. Practical, beautiful, perfect. "Emma helped me pick it out," he said. "She said it needed to be something you'd want to wear every day, not just something expensive. She also said it should sparkle because you're sparkly on the inside, even if you pretend not to be." Adriana felt tears threatening. "Mason Reece, are you asking me what I think you're asking me? I know we've only been officially together for 6 months. I know by some people's standards that's too fast, but I've already wasted too much time being afraid." He took her hand, his voice steady and sure. "Marry me, Adriana. Be my wife and Emma's mother and the person I get to wake up next to for the rest of my life. Let me love you properly, officially, completely." "Yes," Adriana said without hesitation. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Mason slipped the ring on her finger, and it fit perfectly. Like everything else in her life since she'd chosen to be vulnerable, since she'd chosen love over fear. They kissed, soft and sweet, in her corner office overlooking the city she'd once ruled alone. But now she wasn't alone. Now she had a family waiting at home, a wise 7-year-old who taught them both about courage and a future filled with possibility. "Emma's going to lose her mind," Adriana said, laughing through happy tears. "She's going to demand to plan the entire wedding. I hope you're prepared for that." "Purple theme." "Oh, definitely purple, and a cake shaped like a castle. She's been planning this since the day she met you." They went home together, not to her penthouse, which she'd sold months ago, but to their house. The house that smelled like the lasagna Mason's mother had taught Adriana to make. The house that sounded like Emma's laughter echoing from the backyard where she was playing with Tor's dog. They'd caved on the dog after exactly 2 weeks. "Emma," Adriana called, "can you come inside for a minute? We have news." The 7-year-old appeared, grass-stained and grinning, the dog bounding beside her. She took one look at Adriana's hand and screamed, a high-pitched sound of pure joy that probably terrified the neighbors. "This is the best day ever. Can I be in the wedding? Can I wear a purple dress? Can I help plan everything? Can we get another dog to celebrate?" "Yes, yes, yes, and absolutely not," Mason said, pulling them both close. "1 dog is plenty." "But we're getting married," Emma protested. "Married people need 2 dogs." "Where did you learn that?" Adriana asked, laughing. "I made it up, but it sounds right." That evening, after Emma had finally gone to bed, still chattering about wedding plans and bridesmaid dresses and whether they could have a chocolate fountain at the reception, Mason and Adriana sat on their back porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "Do you ever regret it?" Mason asked quietly. "Giving up your old life, the penthouse, the constant work, the singular focus on your career." Adriana thought about it honestly. She'd sold her penthouse and bought a home. She'd stepped back from day-to-day operations to make time for soccer games and family dinners. She'd learned to delegate and trust and prioritize things that couldn't be measured in quarterly earnings. "I didn't give up my life," she said finally. "I expanded it. I'm still CEO. I'm still building innovative technology and changing industries. But now I'm also a partner and a mother and a person who actually has a life outside of work. I'm more, not less." "We're lucky," Mason said, "all three of us, to have found each other." "Luck had nothing to do with it." Adriana leaned against him, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her ear. "It was choice. Every single day, choosing to be brave, choosing to be vulnerable, choosing love even when it was terrifying. And now it's not terrifying anymore. Now it's just home." Sarah's photo still sat on the mantle inside, alongside photos of their growing family. Mason still wore his wedding ring from his first marriage on a chain around his neck. Emma still talked about her mother, keeping Sarah's memory alive through stories and traditions. But there was room for all of it, for grief and joy, for past and future, for the family that was lost and the family that was being built. Love, Adriana had learned, wasn't about replacing what was lost. It was about having the courage to build something new without forgetting what came before. It was about showing up even when you were scared. It was about choosing connection over protection, vulnerability over safety, life over mere survival. 10 weeks later, they got married in the backyard of their home. It was a small ceremony, Emma in her purple dress serving as both flower girl and ring bearer, Claire flying in from London to serve as maid of honor, Mason's SEAL team brothers forming an honor guard, and Margaret crying happy tears in the front row. No media circus, no corporate spectacle, just the people who mattered most. As Adriana said her vows to Mason, with Emma holding both their hands and beaming so widely her face might split, she thought about how far she'd come. From the woman who believed love was a transaction to someone who understood that love was the greatest investment she'd ever make. Not because it guaranteed returns, but because it made every day richer, fuller, more meaningful. "I promise to show up," she said to Mason, her voice clear and certain. "Every day, in every way that matters. I promise to choose you, to fight for us, to be brave even when I'm scared. I promise to love Emma as my own, to honor Sarah's memory, to build a life with you that's messy and complicated and absolutely perfect." Mason's vows were simpler but no less profound. "I promise to stop letting fear make my decisions, to trust that love is worth every risk, to build a future without forgetting the past, to choose happiness over safety every single day, to love you with everything I am for as long as I live." When they kissed, Emma cheered so loudly that several birds flew out of the nearby trees. That night, after the guests had left and Emma had finally fallen asleep in her purple dress because she refused to take it off, Adriana and Mason stood in their bedroom, looking at the life they'd built together. "No regrets?" Mason asked one more time. Adriana thought about the woman she'd been, cold, suspicious, alone. She thought about the walls she'd built and the fear she'd carried. She thought about how close she'd come to letting that fear win, to choosing safety over love, protection over vulnerability. And she thought about the woman she'd become, still strong, still brilliant, still fierce, but now also soft and open and deeply, profoundly connected. "Not a single one," she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. Because in the end, the greatest risk wasn't loving someone and potentially losing them. The greatest risk was never loving at all. And Adriana Werner, now Adriana Werner Reece, had always been someone who knew how to take calculated risks. This time, she'd risked her heart. And she'd won everything.